Well, the rest of the 2024 lineup for Harley-Davidson has been released, and today I want to show you 7 of the biggest changes and differences from the new Road and Street Glide to the older models. Some of the changes I'm going to talk about are more obvious, but others you actually have to dig into the details to see some of these changes that they've made. So I was able to put together, I think, a pretty awesome list. But no matter what your opinion is, because I know people have very strong opinions of these new motorcycles, I want to hear it. Do you love them? Do you hate them? And why? Just let me know down below after the video, and if you like what I do, consider subscribing. You can also join me on Patreon or join the channel right here and gain access to some pretty cool perks. Let's go and get into it. Now, the first thing I want to talk about is one of the most obvious changes. I promise you things will get better and a little more secretive as far as changes you may not have noticed after this, but I cannot ignore the fairings on these two new bikes. The Road Glide especially, I mean, I thought there was only so many things you could do with a fairing, but Harley-Davidson really changed the entire concept of what the shark nose fairing is. Now, I will say that they kept enough of the profile with the batwing and shark nose to where it's recognizable, but it's still it's so crazy how different it actually is. And of course, at the center of the Road Glide is the headlight. Now, you still kind of see remnants of the dual headlight, but then of course it has the LEDs that stretch out, onto the fairing out from that. It almost looks like it has a Joker smile of sorts, because the bottom, not only is the top contoured like it has been, but the bottom is contoured too, so it's almost like the new Road Glide has somewhat of an overbite. What I thought was interesting is if you look at an old Road Glide from the side and a new one, on the old ones you couldn't see the headlights at all. On the new ones, you see all of that light. And I imagine that this thing probably has really incredible lighting at night. Now, the Street Glide is a little more subtle in its changes, but of course you have a single headlight in the front like you always have. Kind of has a squared off appearance to it a little bit, but then you have the LEDs that go up towards up the batwing fairing, and again, they just did just an incredible job. Now, they talk about computational something another, basically to give you the most aerodynamic fairing that they have ever put on a motorcycle. And I don't know anything about that, but what I can say is that these look so wildly different. I'm a huge fan of them. I got a chance to see them in person finally at Myrtle Beach Harley-Davidson, and I got to tell you, man, they look really sharp. They also redesigned the windshield on the bikes too, definitely more aerodynamic as well. So overall, just the front of the bike, what most people see, it definitely is a crazy difference. And I imagine that a lot of people are either going to love it or they're going to hate it. But over time, I think that a lot of people will actually warm up to the new design. It didn't take long for me at all, though. I really like the way the new fairing and lighting setup looks on both bikes. Now, another thing they were able to do is actually shave weight on these motorcycles. It's not as much as the CVO. They actually dropped 35 pounds on the CVO, but they dropped 16 pounds on both the Road and the Street Glide. That, coupled with the new 117 motor that they're putting in these bikes instead of the 114, is actually a pretty impressive feat, I would say. And one thing they finally did, they listed the horsepower and the torque rating on the new bikes. It's pretty impressive. We are going in the right direction. So now you're at 105 horsepower and 130 foot-pounds of torque, compared to it was roughly like 96 horsepower on the 114 and 115 foot-pounds of torque. Now again, it's not going to be as much as the new CVO Road Glide, but either way, it's still a step in the right direction. More power, less weight, better performance. Now, another big change we have this year is its liquid-cooled heads as opposed to oil-cooled. Now, of course, the Road Glide Limited and Ultra Limiteds have been using the twin-cooled setup for some time now, but now we have a similar system on the new Road and Street Glide. Now, of course, you don't have the dual fans, but still, I'm hoping that this will provide better comfort, especially in the summertime and when you're in stop-and-go traffic. Now, of course, we have a new display, and that can't be understated, but what's inside of the system itself makes these bikes totally different than the older ones. One of the biggest things, we now have ride modes. So you have road, you have rain, you have sport, and custom. And so each one of these modes, you can actually change things like, you know, your engine braking and your cornering ABS and your cornering traction control, your torque control. You can change all these different parameters to that. So it's not just, you know, set it and you have no other options there. You actually do have options now. And I'm so glad to see Harley went to this. You finally have ride modes on the big baggers, and like I said, man, it makes a huge difference, I know, on the Challenger and even the Chieftain, and I'm hoping that it will make an equal difference on the new baggers from Harley. Now, of course, this is a 12-inch display, so you're literally doubling that of the Boom GTS. You're also getting rid of your physical gauges. Now, I personally like analog gauges, but at the same time, you still have the look of the analog gauges that you can change it to, and your different modes, your different, you know, riding modes and stuff are going to change the appearance of the Skyline OS anyways, so it's kind of a cool compromise there where you can still have the look, but it's all incorporated into one. That stuff is no longer separate. I noticed when I was messing around with the ones at Myrtle Beach Harley that you can actually have the navigation, which is overlaid with the tachometer and the speedometer, so it just gave it a really cool look. Another little Easter egg is on the Street Glide. There's actually a phone holder under the new display, so you just push that in. I think it can hold like 35 pounds, which, you know, is plenty, but you could put your keys in there or whatever you want to, really. You got a pretty decent amount of space in there, so you just push that in, plug your phone in, put it back in, boom, you're good to go. Now, they do have a new shock setup in the front and the rear. You have the outboard emulsions on the rear with 3 inches of travel and preload that you can adjust, but, you know, not riding this thing, I really just am including this one as a bonus because I have no idea if they're going to be better or worse. I know on the CVO Road Glide, you know, they have a 47 millimeter inverted front fork. And of course there's, you know, like a more adjustability in the CVO, but without riding it, I can't really speak to that too much. But when we come back to the rear, one thing you will see is a new lighting setup. You have 2 LED strips like the custom look of the older CVOs now on the Road and the Street Glide. Oh, personally, I don't know if the lighting is better, worse, the same, no idea. But the older ones, of course, you have, you know, 2 halogen bulbs in the rear and then a running light underneath that. They've gotten rid of all that and just replaced it with the combo brake and turn signal little strips on the back fender. Another change is the stretch saddlebags on the specials. That's now gone. The redesigned bags, they sit right above the pipes, but they actually have some pretty cool contrast cuts in the rear. Now, I'm a fan of the stretch bags. I think it is a clean, custom kind of slam bagger look straight from the factory, but for performance sake, this should be maybe a little bit better. Now, according to Harley, you have 32-degree lean angle on the right, and now you have 32-degree lean angle on the left as well. I'm not too sure why they got rid of these stretch bags. Like I said, I always liked it, but for more of a performance bagger look, this kind of fits the bill. Now, another thing that I noticed with the bags when I actually looked at them up at Harley is that they're actually a little bit wider now. So it appears that you have more space on the inside of the bags, which is always a good thing. Especially when you're talking about a touring motorcycle, I like having more space. It's not an awkward kind of outward push of the bags. It's very subtle, but when you look at them compared to the older ones, they definitely do widen out just a little bit. And last but certainly not least are all of the rider safety enhancements that you had to pay extra money for in the previous models are now included in the new one. So your hill hold control, your cornering ABS, your drag torque control, TPMS sensors, and traction control all included. Now you may be thinking, man, the price of these bikes probably went up by a ton, and not really. I mean, with what I'm seeing, a blacked out Road Glide is about the same price as the Road Glide Special and even the Street Glide Special. So it doesn't look like the price went up that much. And I think for everything they've thrown into this, again, not having used the Skyline OS for any period of time, so there are some stipulations here. And of course, not rid them yet, from what I see, I feel like they put a lot into these new bikes. They really flipped the script this year and just put everything they had into the new motorcycles and gave us a bigger engine. And so you don't have to spend $44,000 or $50,000 in order to get all of these new features and still have a pretty awesome looking motorcycle. So I'm super excited to ride these things. I will be going out to Las Vegas to actually ride them here in the coming week, and so I'll be sharing a lot of videos and stuff like that from that trip. So make sure you subscribe for that. And of course, I want to hear from y'all. Do you like the new look? Do you hate it? Whatever your opinion is, leave those things down below. And again, if you like what I do, consider subscribing. See y'all on the next one. And as always, hold them down.